Welcome to the Wellness Pulse with Monica Stevens. From CPR to self care, staying in rhythm with your well being. Thanks for tuning in. And honestly, I'm really kind of surprised that I didn't ask these questions sooner, but I guess it started to occur to me after over a decade of being a American Heart Association BLS instructor. Where did CPR actually come from? Who actually invented this science? And maybe I've learned some snippets along the way, but I can understand now that I've done a lot more research as to why it wasn't really clear to me as to where CPR evolved. I was absolutely convinced that CPR must have been born out of desperation, somebody wanting to save a loved one in a time when they really, 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 really needed it. So, if you want to go, I guess through the history, we did some wild stuff. I mean, honestly, for centuries, humans tried everything from barrels, horses, and even tobacco enemas, all in the desperate attempt to bring people back to life. Man, it wasn't until the 1950s that science finally caught up with instinct. I was wondering, like, why, or what really made people do CPR? And I guess really, our natural inclination to want to, save people. I think people realized that, breathing was synonymous with living. And so they were trying to just kind of like trial and error it out. I couldn't find any scientific documentation for any of the early methods that we utilized to try to get people back to breathing. There is a lot of research and a lot of focus on drowning victims. So, like, I guess before like 1891, everything was just really kind of like wild. So there's not a lot of like documentation on, I guess, people that were actually saved. But, they did have some, methods that they were using, some slightly scientific and others maybe not so much. So with that being said, let's talk about a little bit of CPR history, okay? So before, I guess, like the 1800s, or like, the early resuscitation methods, before obviously CPR, in the 1700s, there was tobacco smoke enemas. They were believed to reheat and stimulate organs. I guess there's no actual connection between colon stimulation and restarting the heart. But this was actually condoned by the Royal Humane Society back in the 1700s and 1800s. It was the Royal Humane Society of London promoted the use of tobacco smoke enemas to revive drowning victims. So actual tobacco smoke was blown into the rectum using a bellows and a tube. The belief was that nicotine and heat would stimulate respiration, warm the body, and potentially save lives. So the way that this was actually done is a bellows would push smoke through a canister and into a rectal tube inserted into the patient. Some physicians even used long stem pipes to blow the smoke by mouth. The rectum was chosen because it was believed to absorb stimulants quickly into the bloodstream. And then they even had kits that were stationed along the Thames River in London for emergency use. They believed that this would work because nicotine was seen as a strong stimulant. The warm smoke could potentially revive someone cold from near drowning, and enemas were already like pretty popular at that time as a mechanism or a way of delivering medicine, so it seemed like an extension of that knowledge. Again, there were no confirmed scientifically documented cases of tobacco smoke enemas successfully reviving persons in cardiac arrest. In rare cases, someone who was like only hypothermic may have appeared to wake up, but this had nothing to do with the tobacco itself. So the Royal Humane Society helped legitimize public life-saving efforts, even if some of the methods were, off or misguided, related to science that's known today. But the phrase "blow smoke up your arse" originates from this exact practice. So once then, it was actually a literal like use in practice, and now it's used to describe false flattery or insincere praise. That's kind of funny, right? So we've come a long way from there. CPR didn't even begin to resemble what we know it to look like until the 1950s or the 1960s. So we've got a lot of creativity and I guess trials, nothing beats a try but a fail type deal up until then. So our tobacco smoke enemas were, popular and top of the healthcare treatment chain of events in the 1700s. Other things that they would utilize would be rolling on barrels. And I guess this was meant to squeeze water from the lungs, but it also caused internal injuries and it didn't restart breathing. So they would actually roll patients on barrels. Whipping. Um, so I guess they thought pain thought to shock was thought to shock the body awake. Um, in the 1800s, we got a little bit better, sort of. We started with the body inversion. I guess because they wanted to drain fluids and stimulate breath, they were attempting to drain the lungs. The only problem was that the blood pooled in the head, which caused further problems. Also in the 1800s, hot and cold baths were thought to shock the system into breathing. Now, this one is a little bit maybe for my horse enthusiasts, and I have my own horse addictions, but they had a trotting horse method, and I guess the jostling was thought to possibly stimulate breathing. There's also the Russian method, which actually appears to be an early form of like really rough chest stimulation. So, between those, that was maybe a possible early, rendition of chest compressions. And the bellows method, although it seems ridiculous, I guess it was like the first actual attempt at circulating oxygen. So even though, taking, smoke and literally blowing it in the rectum seems crazy to us, it, was an attempt at circulating oxygen. Thanks again for listening. If you or anyone you know needs to learn CPR, first aid, or a life saving skill, please contact People's Choice CPR and Safety. From CPR to self care, the Wellness Pulse is staying in rhythm with your well being. I'm Monica Stevens. Take care.